Well, hey there, everyone. Today I am here to interview Drew from the YouTube channel Genetically Modified Skeptic. He reached out to me after he saw my videos about the May Day protests here in Seattle, and we discussed the rising tide of Christian nationalism. The interview is awesome. I had a great time talking to him, and we mainly talked about the metaphysical, theological underpinnings of the people that are driving these movements, because I think it's critical to understand that stuff. And I personally had basically no knowledge of it before watching a lot of his content. He has some amazing content debunking a lot of the misconceptions related to trans people from these Christian groups that are very queerphobic. And we get into all of that. And I talk about my experiences engaging with people who are specifically anti-queer, anti-trans, and how I can do a better job converting them in the future. So check out this conversation, and please go watch Drew's channel. You're gonna love it, I think, if you love my content. You're a creator that I just started watching in the last like 3 or 4 months, and I think the reason YouTube fed me your content was because you have some very explicit, like trans-focused videos, like, and very in-depth around like debunking certain things, like attacking certain arguments, and like really like going all the way down the rabbit hole. And what I'm starting to realize is like I got into this from the aspect of like I fit into the trans athlete like moto community,
right?
That's where I kind of come at like trans rights and trans support from, which is like a separate set of people. And then but you're like in this totally different realm of like hyper religious, which I am now being exposed to, which is how you reached out to me. Was you saw, as I understand it, you saw my video recently about going to these different events in Seattle, and which are hyper religious, based around this group that they're Christian nationalists, very much connected to Christian fascism, and like a couple of dials away from like for 2 or 3 degrees from the Trump administration and like this everything that is happening now.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm really excited to reach out to me, because I'm realizing, wow, I don't know anything about these people, and my ability to, the more I learned by watching your content, the more I realized I've kind of like had my tactics wrong, and I really didn't understand it very well. And like people in Seattle had their tactics wrong. We did a bad job, and like that's creating more downstream problems. So that's why I was really excited to talk to you, that you reached out to me like immediately, because you have an expertise that I just do not have. And you've been a content creator since 2017. Like Mark, you actually started your channel like a month after mine, which is amazing. Okay. Which is amazing. Yeah, I was in February. You are obviously way more successful than me at all of this, but you're a Texas boy. Like you were born. My understanding is like from watching your content is you were born in a fundamentalist Baptist community. And maybe can you just talk about that? Introduce yourself to the audience and these concepts.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Drew. I make videos about like religion and do religious commentary and criticism from a non-religious perspective. And I try not to be an asshole while doing it. And so sometimes I make an educational video, sometimes doing commentary. And yeah, I've touched on a lot of like trans issues stuff because I mean, it's a religious push, right? That's kind of ultimately behind the idea that trans people aren't valid and trans people are scary and even maybe demon possessed and all that type of stuff. Yeah, we have a religious, nationalist takeover of our country right now. So it makes sense for me to talk about this kind of stuff. But yeah, I grew up in a independent fundamental Baptist family. I was also homeschooled for religious reasons. Like my family didn't believe in evolution and didn't want me to be around like liberals at school. And so I was homeschooled. And I was taught, young earth creationism, like the earth is 6,000 years old and was created in 6 literal days. And, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve kind of vibes. And I, at a certain point after graduating from an evangelical Christian college, a pretty conservative one in the only part of Texas that's actually considered the Deep South, East Texas. The town that I went to college in was also like the capital for the KKK in Texas.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
After graduating from, my East Texas Christian college, I had been like starting to question some things around religion, and some of my education that I got in science and in psychology, my degrees in psychology in college made me like question some of the preconceptions that I had, about humanity, about like how religious experience works and all that. And long story short, I ended up, people call it deconstructing now, but like deconstructing my Christianity and becoming like an agnostic or atheist. And that was in 2016. A year later, I was just like, I don't have anybody to talk to about this stuff. I've never known anybody really. I had one friend who was raised Buddhist in my school, and he like didn't believe in God, but he had to keep that really, really quiet at the school, right? Because it's still a Christian school. And I didn't have anybody to really speak to about not being religious. And so, yeah, in 2017, I was like, I have to like talk to somebody. I guess I used to make skate videos when I was a kid, so I knew how to like edit. I got like a $40 editing software with like my student ID or something that was still somehow valid a year later, 2 years later almost.
They don't audit that stuff very well.
Right. And so yeah, I started making YouTube videos.
You don't have to tell me directly, but like, I assume you still live in Texas? Do you live in like Austin area? Is like, have you found like
I live in Austin.
Okay.
It's the Blue Island. I mean, when I say Blue Island, it's like, it's the liberal, like still super capitalist, like Blue Island, in the middle of the Red Sea. But, there's pretty solid, like leftist and queer communities, which are often kind of the same thing in Austin. And so, yeah, it's pretty easy to meet people that are like-minded here, for me at least.
So you don't feel like in this, I guess, as I'm meeting a lot of trans people, and like a lot of them the conversation is about getting people out of red states. Do you feel safe doing you're very outspoken, like you're very upfront about it in the same way that I am. And like, I am aware that kind of, in some ways, paints a target on your back. And part of why I feel safe is like, I'm in Seattle. Like when these Christian nationalist people come here, they are not like, that is not the people that are around. Like they don't have protection. It's just them and the cops. Do you feel safe? And have you thought about moving out of Texas at all? Or
I've thought about moving out of the country. Yeah. Yeah. So, my family's here, and I have a nephew that I'm very close to, and I really want to be in his life. And, I feel like I serve an important role like in his life. And so I just want to be here because of that. But then also, like, Texas is actually much more of like a purple state than people think. Like the GOP here is, rather than being implicitly a Christian party, it's explicitly a Christian party. Like if you read the party platform of the Republicans in Texas, they're like, we are Christian. The Republican platform is based on the Bible, whatever the fuck that means, because the Bible says a million different things.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like there are like-minded people around, like especially in Austin. And when it comes to like everyday life, like when I'm walking down the street, like I'm not worried about it. I used to live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where, if I had like my nails painted, or someone said that I said that, what I did for work, like I was an atheist YouTuber, people would be like, oh no. But like in Austin, it's not like that. So everyday experience, yeah, I feel safe. And I think that has to do with like looking the way I look, of course. If and when shit hits the fan and we're talking about like the National Guard being employed, hell no, I'm not safe. I do kind of wonder at what point, the fact that I'm not a bigger YouTuber keeps me from getting like grabbed by ICE or something. You
think that 800K isn't a big enough YouTuber to like, or?
Well, I mean, okay, so Hassan has been detained once at the border, but he hasn't been like raided or something like that at this point. When that happens, I do think there's going to be a little bit of like foreshadowing for me. I think I'm going to be able to see it coming somewhat, but up until like, I want to ride that line. I want to be here as long as I can to just try to use the voice and the image that I have to try to fight for people who like can't. I mean, no, like trans people are not safe in Texas, like full stop. If you go to the Capitol, you have to take your friends to guard the door if you go to the fucking bathroom because you want to vote, because you want to speak in a city council meeting. Like I've seen it in real life. You're not safe being like visibly queer in a lot of places in Texas. But for me, I'll use the limited safety that I have as long as I can.
Me and my partner were down in Texas last year for COTA at the Circuit of the Americas doing racing there. And I'll be honest, the first reason I don't ever really want to go back to Texas is because that fucking place is humid as shit. I do not understand how you survive. Like in the shade, it feels just as fucking hot as the sun. Like kill me. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was definitely a part of it was like, man, like not feeling safe going. And like my partner, like the people we were with, I was with 3 trans women, like, and they all pass well, but like, obviously like cis women are being caught up in this, right? Like you have to like,
Yeah.
it's very subjective.
Oh yeah.
And the more I travel and exist around trans people, yeah, the more you realize like there is just an air of anxiety around public bathrooms specifically, like just even in Seattle, you know, like I was always the person when I met my partner and we started kind of going out places, it was always kind of like, I'll go run in and get stuff in the public space, or I'll go do this because I'm the one that's always going to be safe. And like, I'm also a very personal person. I enjoy talking to people, and like, I get the retail turns on very, very quickly, and I can win people over fast. But like, yeah, I like underestimated that. Like, that's definitely a thing that like cis people or people that do not understand and like are not in community with trans people just do not appreciate. And like, we are now at the point where the country is like, we had plans before Trump was elected to like go and travel and do more traveling and racing. And that is just very much condensed to like, we're sticking on West Coast. Like we're sticking in Washington, Oregon, and California. Because we don't feel safe going there and having to deal with that shit. And it's really sad and disgusting. And I am curious when you're with your education. I could be misremembering, but I think you said that you have a psychology degree. But I think I remember you saying something about either doing gender studies or some master's level studies of.
I just did some master's level courses in human sexuality. So it was a generic thing, like, and it was at a Christian school, which is important to remember. So it definitely didn't have the kind of gender studies. There was very little in the way of anything sociological. Like we had the bare bones theory, and then the rest was all like very much like applied toward my counseling track that I was on. There were certain things that were in textbooks and in resources that I had to have for the class that were not really taught in the class. But I was the type of student that, you know, if it was in my degree program, I read everything that was in all of the books. And so, yeah, I read all of the stuff about queerness in those books that like the teacher did not teach me. Right. So, yeah, I have some master's level like coursework in human sexuality.
One of the things that kind of came to me as you were talking, and I'm watching, and I think I watched your video about like how you deconstructed or got out of religion and became an atheist. And one of the parallels I found interesting was like how similar the way you described like coming out to your parents as an atheist, and how many parallels, because I've now been around so many trans people, and like I've watched many trans people now go through the experience of transitioning like right in front of their parents, like dealing with whatever happens from, you know, parents that like even like liberal parents in Washington state who are like queer supporting openly. They then get their own trans kid, and suddenly it's like, it's not as easy as you think, you know, and you have all the same dynamics and issues. But that was what kind of I thought was, I never really thought about it before, but like coming out as a atheist to a Christian family like you had must have felt in so many ways like a coming out, because you're probably losing friend groups. You're probably having certain family members and people treat you and operate differently around you. Is that where you feel like your empathy for trans people and like that connection comes from? Or is there, I guess I'm curious how you got into being such a staunch supporter and trans ally, which is again, another thing that just deeply connected me to your content, because in my world, it's like, there's a lot of people that will lightly support trans people in the way that like Democrats and liberals will. And then there's people that full throatedly do it. And those are the people that I connect most with. And you are absolutely in that category.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think that experience was pretty formative for the way that I think about just I mean, the way that I think about like intersectional issues, right? The way that I think about disability too, the way that I think about like blackness in America, the way that I think about trans issues. It is formative for that. Although I will say that while I you know, from the very beginning of like coming out as an atheist was like, yeah, this is like terrifying. And I feel like I can relate to like the relatively few gay people that are like on the outskirts of my circles, like at that point. While I can relate to them and their experience a little bit, I do think that I was like so focused on the atheist stuff that it was pretty easy for me to get sucked into a lot of like liberal bullshit, like Sam Harris type stuff, you know?
Yeah.
If I had stayed where I was at when I came out as an atheist and the way that I thought about atheism and stuff, I'd probably be like, you know, like a secular Zionist type today, right? And it runs pretty strong in the straight white male part of the atheist community. That
I used to be a Destiny viewer, so I totally get you, because
yeah.
his honestly his takes on Palestine were my final like, I can't follow you here, dude. This is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So you get it. No, it's exactly that vibe. So, you know, like you're like, oh, you know, of course, like don't be racist, like don't be homophobic, don't be sexist and all this kind of stuff. But that kind of means like, don't use slurs that often and like, don't really examine systemic issues. And if you do examine systemic issues, you can be like, well, redlining was bad. And, you know, discriminating, you know, based on housing or not allowing gay marriage that's bad. But don't talk about capitalism. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like a dial of like, they dial the justice back for like personal expedience and comfort is what it kind of, that's what it feels like to me. You know, that individualist worldview versus looking at things like, no, we should really like talk more about doing things communally and like really deconstructing all the stuff that like prevents that and gets in the way of that.
Yeah. I think the thing that gave me a more like systems view, to actually look at systems in play, that allowed me to kind of get to the more leftist place that I'm at today was actually being an atheist content creator for a while and seeing that I'm probably going to make a video about this at some point. That the way that you make it as an atheist YouTuber is to be the token pick-me atheist, to go along with all of these systems that evangelical Christians and Christian nationalists have set up, be controlled opposition for them, be the guy that sits on stage and argues about some abstract theological concept. Like you can call somebody out, for instance, for being like, oh, you know, in the Old Testament, God commands genocide against the Amalekites. You can talk about that in front of a Christian audience and a Christian apologist will be okay with it. They'll like share pay with you if there's a paid event, whatever. But if you say, hey, you're using the idea that God allows for genocide sometimes, which is found in the Old Testament, to justify genocide that's happening right now, you are doing genocide right now, then they don't want to work with you anymore. And so obviously there's something going on here. There's some larger system here. It doesn't just have to do with like, oh, well, you know, they don't hate atheists. They'll sit next to an atheist on stage. Like it's deeper than whether or not they like atheists or are nice to atheists or whatever. There's a whole system in place. And so me analyzing the way that most atheists who weren't willing to like play ball with that kind of crap, were marginalized, that allowed me to realize like, oh, this something similar happens with like Black conservatives. Something happens similarly like with trans conservatives. Like Blair White lives, you know, 15 minutes away from me, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah. Oh,
yeah. And so, yeah, I think that being an atheist content creator was a thing that allowed me to analyze systems more because I had the experience finally of like, in a way, at least having the choice of benefiting from an oppressive or abusive system or, you know, being like, fuck that. I'm going to try to like make my own lane or at least like benefit from solidarity instead. Right.
yeah. It reminds me of like I didn't watch a lot of atheist YouTubers. And I think even like it prevented me from watching your content initially because to me, I connect atheist YouTubers with Manosphere or Gamergate. Like that is like the Thunderfoots and like that type of shit. And like, yeah, I totally see how like, again, incentives just take you there, right? If you're willing to do that, like it's very easy to And again, with my personal experience now, seeing how deep this goes with like local like grifters who are there to like create some sort of sensationalist content for Fox News and these other ones, and seeing like, oh, you actually provide a very important, like, you're in a very important role here that is going to be supported by these systems because you continue to enforce patriarchy, you continue to reinforce like these other broad systems with that, like, you don't challenge it too fucking hard, right? And you keep the discourse machine going, in the same way that our mainstream media is just like they're just constantly like yapping about bullshit and nothing ever fucking happens out of it because it's never that far, it's never that radical outside the bounds. You also, one of the other things I really enjoyed about something I heard you say, which again, I don't hear many people say this. Like I can think of you and me, and maybe other people don't just talk about it, but the way you were like, and I'm looking at your background right now, is like the hint of it is you talked about why you have your background, and you said it's specifically to look like Steven Crowder's because you wanted to build and develop your channel around kind of not tricking people, but getting people to like listen to somebody who was speaking something that they needed to hear, that like you kind of like Trojan horse it in just with like your physical, like your identity and a lot of assumptions. And I do the same thing too. Like my channel started as just motorcycle content. I just wanted to teach people to ride motorcycles. I was having constant conversations with people, and I was like, this is a conversation I can do more efficiently if I make a video and hand it to people. And maybe it'll become a side thing separately, because I've got a full-time like cybersecurity career separately that I enjoy and like. So that YouTube is very much like a hobby for me, which is part of why I don't think I've grown nearly as much. But yeah, like you talk about that. Like, can you, I just want you to just share that a little bit, like your story of why you do that. And
Yeah, I'll first say that when you commented on my video, like pointing out like, hey, I kind of do something similar. Like I appreciate that, like you're kind of trying to look like a Steven Crowder type a little bit with your aesthetic. You're like, I have done a lot of that, but also there can be a drawback in that it might scare a lot of queer people away from the channel because they don't realize that like I'm an ally. So you're like, you like play in this in-between space where I think in your last video you called yourself an Aryan looking motherfucker at one point.
Yeah.
And so you have that, and you can't get away from looking like that. But you can also have like the trans flag in the background, and so you like ride that line, and which is cool. There's utility to it. I don't have to tell you, but yeah, I realized in like 2019, when I go to atheist meetups and stuff like that in real life, it's like much more queer, much more like there's many more women in this space than you might expect or were in spaces that I used to be in, like more conservative spaces. When you're online, in order to really get a larger platform, for some reason you have to appeal to the right. And I don't think I fully understood that, like, oh, there's a whole system of shaping atheists in an image that allows them to be used as controlled opposition yet. I didn't have that idea in my head. But I was like, if you want people to listen to you, you have to look like a certain thing. But then also, it's like the people that I want to influence the most are not really... they're not people who like don't look like me, frankly. Like I feel like I'm more learning from them a lot of the time, and like they're the ones that are challenging me in like a meaningful way, and also they're like already here, helping me out or whatever. And so it's the people that are doing kind of the most damage and that maybe need to be reached the most are like they're white boys who are being told that, like, at maybe even through implication, that they need to listen to like other white boys, white men that are aggressive. They're like overtly masculine. They don't use big like leftist terminology. If you say capitalism, then people tune out automatically. You have to say like they care about making money, they're greedy, and then they'll like listen to you, because that's different.
Has that given you any challenges? Like, do you feel like you're like, I don't know what your comments look like. Have you had like, was there times in your comments were a lot less supportive and a lot more conflictual, or?
Yeah. So I I feel like a real turning point for me. I don't know if I could call it a turning point. When I started having this discourse that we're having right now more publicly and like stopped hiding as much was in 2023. So the landmark times in this story are in 2019. I was like, okay, I'm moving. I need to get a new background. What aesthetic am I going to go for? I need to attract like these kind of right-wing guys who are like still falling down this pipeline and they think atheist stuff is really safe for them. So I'm going to try to look like Steven Crowder, and then I'm going to have a completely different message. Is this working? Hopefully it's working. I don't really know. In 2023, 4 years later, I still have like a similar background, and I invite a scholar of religious studies that lives here in Austin to talk to me about the satanic panic of the 80s and how that parallels the anti-trans panic that we're having right now, which often has narratives of demonic possession and demons and darkness and all this kind of stuff. And, the takeaway from that video is a certain group of people, a certain type of person likes to use these supernaturalist narratives to literally demonize people they don't like when these people gain more, public visibility. So like in the 1980s, you had different people in, music videos, you had Black culture getting like more popular in mainstream media, MTV started to be a thing. And so they came up with a bunch of like, even nerd culture started to be more visible. So they use all this like nonsense about demons and the devil and all this stupid stuff to say, oh, all those people that are outside of like the order that we want are all bad. Let's weaponize the police against them. And it worked. Like, we're still doing that today. I mean, yeah, I don't have to tell you about the police.
You ain't gonna tell me twice.
Yeah. And so now, basically the same thing is happening. Like Ben Shapiro gets up there and talks about Lil Nas X, and he talks about how it's all satanic and demonic because he knows that if he just talks about like being Black and gay is bad, then like that's going to get a certain amount of pushback that won't be as productive for him. So I very explicitly was saying in this video in 2023, people broadly of different religious ideas are having this whole ridiculous panic, moral panic about the fact that trans people exist. And it's not different than when people were, afraid of Black people in the 80s, were afraid of nerds playing D&D, were afraid of pagans, like whatever. It's all the same bullshit. And a certain part of my audience was like, oh, I don't like the religious overreach and like propaganda. And I realized maybe I have been falling for that a little bit with this. Like, maybe I do need to rethink my ideas about trans people. Like, maybe trans people aren't actually a threat, and I'm just seeing a lot of media that's pretending they are to use them as scapegoats. But a large portion of my audience, large enough to where I lost like 1,000 subscribers in a day, was like, I can't believe that you sold out. Obviously, you're like rich now. Like, you sold out to the liberal media. The idea of like liberals wanting to protect trans people that much is funny, but like, you've sold out to the liberal media, you're getting big checks, and like, you're refusing to do what's like right and courageous, all this kind of stuff. And like, you're woke now. Like, people really start calling me woke all the time. And so naturally I made another, several videos following up on this stuff, being like, okay, we talked about sociology last time. We talked about culture. Let's talk about science now. Because you're saying, oh, you don't care about science, like that I don't care about science. I'm just woke. I've bought into all this ideology and whatever. So let's talk about the actual studies behind gender affirming care and the psychology behind all this stuff. And also the history of the fact that like gender nonconforming people, according to our, gender categories that are prevailing today, like they've always existed, and you're the one that's like not accepting that. You're the one that's like buying into this like prevailing ideology. Let's do this. Let's get in the nitty gritty. That worked pretty fucking well, I would say. Like,
nice.
People weren't able to argue, I don't think, as well, because they had to actually engage with like scientific studies. And so most of the discourse I got on videos where I was actually talking about science, which I do, my degree does cover, teaching me how to actually look at those things. Their comments were like, Oh, well, you might have left out other studies. I can't even tell from watching this whether you're being biased or not. So I'm just going to turn it off. Or like, nitpicking very specific language that I use, or saying like, "Oh, well, you said assigned male at birth, and so automatically you're a cuck." Okay, that's not a real argument now. You're dismissing yourself. So I feel like I definitely have gotten a pretty strong reaction, like negatively, each time I've talked about trans stuff, and it's affected my other videos where I'm not talking about that. Like certain guys, I mean, it's men, to be honest, like they don't want to watch anything now because they think I'm a traitor or something. But I have had like a different group of people be like, oh, that whole Steven Crowder aesthetic was for a purpose, and this has all been kind of like a ploy to try to like get behind enemy lines in a way. Okay, now I feel safe like actually being in this community and watching this. And like since that has happened, I've felt like much happier actually in the kind of like space that I have. When I do in real life events, it's like not just men now. I mean, it's actually mostly it's mostly queer femmes. Like that's what it is. And I'm really, really happy that that's the case, because I've never seen that in like atheist content spaces before, at least not like as like a cis male creator. I haven't, so uh yeah, that's the story.
That sounds very similar to mine. That sounds extremely similar to mine. I made one video because I got really pissed off because I made a trans friend, and I was just like, to me, it was just, it felt like a line where people were just like, wow, I've always just been really against bullying, like my entire life. I can remember, I mean, I was just talking to my grandmother the other day. It was my birthday, and I'm like having phone calls with everybody. And one of them brought up, and I was bringing up the situation here in Seattle, and like I got the most hilarious text from my dad, who I almost never talk to, but it was like, son, did I just see you with a motorcycle helmet in the middle of Seattle on a news station in some sort of major conflict, And I'm just like
Major
conflict. I got a
conflict.
blue. Like, it was just funny. But I'm having these conversations, and they're like, you've always kind of been the guy that was like, you were friends with everyone. And I've always been friends with everyone. I've never felt like better than other people. And I experienced a little bit of, I think you talked about like gay bullying when you were younger, like because of whatever the way you talked or wore stuff you wore. And I experienced a lot of that too. And I fucking hated it. And I didn't want to perpetuate it, and I didn't want to be a part of it. And especially as I became an adult and more independent, I didn't want to perpetuate it. And yeah, like I think that now, like after, and so like that was what led me to speaking out like more directly towards it. And I did get negative feedback, but just like you, I have found that I've realized that like YouTube is a giant place, and you will like, there's just a huge niche of people that are more in that queer spectrum who are totally underserved by the majority that exists. And so that gave me, once that those people started finding me, that just gave me all the more confidence to be like, oh no, like there are like, and they're saying like, we feel like shit constantly everywhere. You make us feel safe. And it's just made me feel way more confident leaning into that. And I feel way happier and better. And the community that I have around me, I meet people randomly. Like I met a biker last night. I'm out riding. Someone's like, oh my God, is that you? And they're just like, can I give you a hug? They're so stoked to see me. And like, I have such a positive reaction. That's like, I know these people, like, let's say, Avosh, for example, who like seems to hate his community, and like there's so many YouTube and content creators who like seem totally not interested in engaging with their audience. And I think it's because they're so, because the people that they cultivate are shitty, and they're not really who they want to be around at the end of the day.
I have to say, I think that maybe you can speak to this too. I think that having the community that I mean, I will say I still have a ton of those guys, right? Like they still follow me. Like at one point I was the biggest atheist YouTuber in the world, and pretty close to being the biggest that ever existed. There's a couple people who have really passed me since then. But like I still have a lot of those guys, but having the community that's really like the core community, the people who would, if they saw me in person, say something, it's like given me a really acute awareness of how much even just like a simple YouTube video like mine can affect someone's real life and their experience and the way that like other people can, be conditioned to treat them, right? And it makes me take that really, really seriously. It's like I'm not just like I see this in like what you do. It's not like it's not YouTube in and of itself. Like this is for something larger. This is for the people that you are with in real life. Like you're not like a content creator. You're like a guy who wants to actually make some sort of change, and YouTube happens to be one of the mediums in which you can act, right? Like that's what this is. And our communities like give us the constant awareness of like that's what every action that we have publicly is. I'm not used to my like very existence being like political as much as like a trans person, especially in Texas, right? But when you're hanging out with trans people, it's like, okay, everything you do is perceived as being such a huge thing. Like, oh, why don't I take on some of that like responsibility and try to like make, act as if what I'm saying actually matters? Because I think it actually does.
It was going to the CHOP specifically, like when the protests happened in 2020, because I had, so the big thing in YouTube is like I had a cop draw a gun on me middle of I don't know if you caught any of that, but
yeah,
that was just like a really pivotal moment in my life. And I had already had a lot of like bad interactions with cops, but that like really solidified it. And so, yeah, so when the 2020 protests and they were all about like reforming police, I was just fucking, thank God, let's fucking go. And but yeah, realizing how many of those people, like it wasn't straight white men out there like leading things and like putting their lives on the line. It was queer people and brown people and combinations and disabled people and like people were just and the community aspect of it and the vibe was so much, it felt more freer than I had ever felt in my life, was being there. And like, and again, no cops around, just do whatever you want, but like nobody hurting each other either. Like kind of, and deconstructing the idea that like, as people, we're just going to revert to animalistic greed and like dominance, which is just totally not how I have ever experienced people operating, other than predominantly cis white men who have the power to do it. Yeah. And I'm definitely going to start talking more about masculinity pieces. I've kind of been hesitant to do it because it feels, I don't know. It feels gauche. It feels like I don't like telling people what to do. I like to inform people about what I'm doing, the value of it, and let people make their own decisions up.
I think that's good. I mean, I think that modeling is the most important part of this, right? Like a lot of the streamer guys like in the manosphere who get like young men to do and think these shitty things even about themselves as men and boys, it's not all because of what they say. It's also what they do. Like there's a reason why Fresh and Fit has women on with them. They don't just talk about women, they talk at women and demean women. They model the way that they want. I don't think they want people to behave any particular way. I think they just want money, and this is the way they're doing it, right? But that to say, I think, explicit conversations about masculinity can be really important, but I think modeling our behavior, the way that we interact with people and treat them, speaks the loudest. And that is something that like you do. And it's like really overtly obvious. Like it's almost in your face, you modeling a certain way of doing this, which is different than like how we've been socialized. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think that in itself is like the most important part.
I think for you, one of the things that attracts me to your content, and again, it's something that I don't do because I do focus on the modeling very much. And I'm glad you recognize that, because that is also what I found is like, if I can prove, because as it started was like, hey, I ride a motorcycle like a total asshole in ways that are supposed to murder you instantaneously. Watch me survive, watch me thrive, watch me have a lot of fun while I'm doing it. Like that was really like, because you can't, you go into the data, and like that is what I love. I love the data. I love learning about those things. But the more I learned, especially about like trans people, and it started with motorcycle stuff. It started with lane splitting, just driving in between cars. It started there. But the more data I read, the more I was like, okay, at best, there's no real conclusion you can draw one way or another, or at worst. But at best, like it is actually a life-saving technique that people should be like taught to learn. And really, this is a very American idea that we don't do this. And it's because of car prioritization. It is because of our car culture. And it is because of Americans like entitlement and on the road, you know, and like, and that made me realize the data-based arguments don't work in all these things. Sometimes you just have to sometimes you just have to model it. You have to show people, and then you have to do it, and then bring deeper lessons that you can't really communicate in data to people. And you do it in the reverse. And I love your content. That's why I love like watching your really in-depth, you had like an hour and something where you were just totally deconstructing this Turek guy's arguments against trans people, which all come from these like Christian cores. And what it does for me is it just gives me the confidence that I can say, oh yeah, it's all like, because it's all demons and shit. It's all shit that doesn't exist. That's where the arguments go. So I can have the confidence to leave all those arguments behind, knowing that they are true and accurate. And if I really needed to, I could absolutely, like if they did the right Googling, they would come to the right conclusion. But I really appreciate about your content. Your content is so fact-based and so just methodological in how you go through things. And I think that's important for people to do, especially on the left. And something that I think that getting out of the more liberal and conservative mindset, to me, like a core aspect of leftism is like, do you critically think? How strong is your critical thinking? How much do you engage with original sources yourself, as opposed to simply taking another person's opinion and making it your own? And so I really love that about your content. And do you, is that like just kind of how you think, or is that a tactical strategy in how you look to like inform people and deconstruct people?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of both. So I think that you hit on something important in that when people are making decisions about social attitudes, which like overall, I think that the way that you treat trans people and think about their rights is a social attitude. Like it's not like a scientific attitude. Like ultimately, it's the way that you decide to interact with people. Like, are you going to allow them to continue to exist, or are you going to like purposely see them as an enemy and try to treat them as lesser, or put them at the bottom of a hierarchy, or some kind of thing like that? These arguments, like arguments for God's existence, the arguments, I'll start there. People don't believe in God because they have like a super solid, like theological, philosophical argument. They believe in God because it's the way they were socialized. That's how it is. And research shows that when people leave religion, it often has to do with an upset in the way they are being socialized, whether they see hypocrisy, they are around people who are good people who aren't and were not socialized the same way as them. And so they're able to question and get out of like believing in whatever, you know, the fundamentalist sect that they were in or whatever. It's ultimately changing of one's social attitudes. Then Christian apologists and atheist YouTubers come in and say, hey, well, ultimately, this is all about philosophy and theology and intellectualism. And we are very, very smart. Our side, they both say this, both sides, our side is the one that's really smart and has all the data and has all the arguments. And so if and when we can prove that we have the best arguments, the best data, that will show that our social attitude is the superior one. And they, in the process, just totally like discount the idea that like most people actually make these decisions based on the way they're socialized, their social circles, things like that. And I think that it's that way with pretty much all issues. Like, I don't think that people are argued based on data, like saying, hey, race science isn't real, so you shouldn't be racist. It's like, no, I mean, people of all races are superficially different, and you shouldn't be a shithead. Like, you've been socialized to act superior. And it's the same thing with trans people. Like, hey, gender expression is diverse, always has been, and like if you treat someone in such and such a way, you're an asshole. That is ultimately what I think people are really making decisions on. So my role is to put out this data, put out these arguments, which I do think, you know, they're all good arguments. I'm not saying that they're, you know, the data doesn't matter at all or something like that. I'm just trying to be like hopefully humble about and realistic about the actual place in this discourse that content like mine actually takes up, like where it's useful. And that is finding people that are like, so I've been socialized to think that being trans is not okay, or that like you have to act a certain way as a certain gender or whatever. But I've kind of like seen people who don't act that way, and I don't know, I don't really feel like they're doing something wrong. But like, I need something to kind of be a tiebreaker here. Or like, I think that I'm right in being like trans affirming, but you know, maybe there's not good arguments. I don't really know. And then my content comes in and tells them like, no, you're good. Like that's what it is. It's a final nail in a coffin, if anything. So it is a small part. I think it's important, or else I wouldn't do it. But it's a small part. The reason why I do it is because that is the way that I was socialized to speak. So, you know, growing up as a Christian, I got into like apologetics, and you had to get into like the detailed arguments and the philosophy of it in order to try to like convince someone to believe in God. You know, that was something that I was really taught to do. And then when I became an atheist, but hadn't really analyzed the way that these systems work in the first place, I'm like, you have to philosophically prove God doesn't exist, and then someone will change their mind. No, that's not how it works. But I got really good at arguing in that way. So I'm just using, you know, that training that I have to play that very small role in, like, I don't know, the trans discourse, if you want to call it that. So if someone actually is at the point where they legit actually care about where the state of medical research is, or they're just a little unsure about, you know, their tentative allyship, like that's when I come into play. But again, I think the most important part is still going to be just modeling, you know, and for like guys that look like us, it's just like, it's not being like necessarily, oh, you're being a fucking asshole because you know, you're shitty to trans people or something. It's just being on video with trans people and acting normal because it's normal.
Yeah, because they're just
right?
people, just like everyone else, just people.
Yeah.
I recently, one of the things, again, really excited about you is that I recently, and I'm not trying to cause drama, but with the motorcycle community, but I recently had a very in-depth conversation with a Texas-based motorcycle rider, I will simply say, about trans people specifically. And it was all private, you know, nothing, but I wanted to emphasize that I did not like that they had said or done things that were transphobic in the past. And the only reason I knew, because I don't watch motorcycle content really, is because my audience watches them and saw it and was like disappointed because they liked him otherwise. But these things came up, and like, again, for a trans person, it's like one of the comments I've gotten a lot is like, man, it's really nice to watch you and just know that I'm not going to get just randomly hit out of the blue with something transphobic. Like,
yeah, you're
that
not
is
going to be
just
surprised.
weird, again, like small amounts of humanity that like should just be normal, but like they just, man, I'm so glad. But like with this person, it's like they have to have that defense mechanism on. And as I was talking to that person in depth, kind of going back and forth about like, hey, why do you think it's okay to like kind of have these memes and make these cracks at trans people that you don't seem to really know? You know, you don't know these people, because again, a lot of the trans memes and like, they're not funny because they're not made for trans people. They're made for people who do not understand the trans experience. And it's all about like, isn't that weird from this perspective of a cis person's experience who knows literally nothing about it? And again, a thing that they don't really understand. But his arguments at the end of the day, and I went through and I kind of like walked through and I did the let me tell you how I feel and let me tell you my experiences. But they boiled down to being trans is a mental illness at the end of the day. And which is, again, like a theological, I'm noticing now, this is not a fact-based argument. This is really a theological argument, which I did not realize until engaging with these people, watching more of your content.
And it's a social
and,
attitude. It's
about,
like, it's backing up. It's like, you know, we're socialized to treat certain types of difference. I mean, a ton of different types of difference. It's not just gender. Like we're trained to treat that as, you know, something other. And then after the fact, we come up with the idea that it must be an illness. Like with the way that, I grew up to like treat people who like were autistic. It's like, oh, you got to treat that as like an illness and like be like, oh no, poor them, and like all this kind of stuff. And or like, oh well, they're just a little this way, so make sure that you're whatever it is. It's like we are socialized to think that this is other, and so we come up with the idea after the fact that like it's a mental illness. I don't think very many of us were actually explicitly taught that being trans is a mental illness, and yet we come to that idea somehow. How? Right? It's like we're looking for a rationalization. But yeah, no, go on.
Well, yeah, and you just brought up another part of it was that he had mentioned was that like blah 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 trans autism, trans I mean, he didn't use neurodivergence, but like effectively saying that like seems like trans people have all these other issues too. And so if you are autistic, if you are this, you are already mentally ill. And so it was like a way of confirming that. And I'm like, well, from my experience, trans people are often more neurodivergent, but that to me is just more like their brains are clearly different in some way than mine, but that's just, I have ADHD. I am neurodivergent as well. So like I can still connect with them. And I find that like, just because someone's autistic, and this connects back to the administration that exists today, right? Of RFK, I'm so angry at the way autism is just totally demonized by these people. And it's like, the only way autism is framed is like, you're basically a vegetable, or you're just like totally, you need someone to care for you 24/7, 365, rather than just thinking and operating in a different way that is like, and socializing in a different way. Because especially I'm sure online, like you probably meet and engage with a lot of people more who are on those spectrums, and that's why they go online, is because it's easier to communicate than in person. I think for them, the comfort is there. But yeah, that was what he said. It's like, oh, well, they have those. So that's part of the mental illness. And he also mentioned, and I'm like, hey, like you shouldn't really bully these people, because that is why they are more suicidal. Like that is where you are actively causing harm. You don't want to actively cause harm to your community, right? And then it was the conversation of, well, suicide is a selfish action, and it's you're going to do that. You're going to do that to other people. And that to me was like, oh, this feels less like a fact-based argument, more of a responsibility. Again, like we're getting back into like theological things. And this person does not openly, to my knowledge, describe any type of like religious things. They don't bring it up, which in the motorcycle community is actually a thing that happens. There's some very popular motorcycle YouTubers that will just inject Christian verses and stuff into their videos, like randomly. And I don't know if that happens. I don't know if you've ever seen that before in other types of content, but like, it was very strange for me to experience and see. Again, people don't complain about it the way they seem to complain about when you speak openly and positively about queer people. And then the last thing he said that was like very much like left me with oh, this is religion, was because he was like, and also last thing I want to say is that people that don't procreate, a community that doesn't do that, is not a community that I'm super interested in listening to about anything, because if they're not repopulating the whatever society, then we're not gonna, then humanity's gonna fall, and I'm just like, okay.
So like, oh, so you don't have any friends that don't have kids then? You're like, oh, well, fuck them. Like, I highly doubt that. Like, and again, and it's all like, and I was just like, I'm gonna end the conversation here instead of continuing to argue. He had some other things going on. I was trying to be empathetic to him at the same time, and I'm also coming at it from, I have learned that like, drilling into all, like, it doesn't need to, you're not going to solve that problem that moment, right? Like that's not, the more conflict you have does not usually create somebody who's just going to come to your side. Like, but sometimes you can inject some stuff, and then later on that kind of sinks in, and then they do their own investigation, or life hits them in a different way, and then they're more open to it. So that was what I was trying to do. But yeah, like, are these things like, did these seem like theological, like kind of centers for you? And yeah, I tend to call them like metaphysical beliefs. So theological, it has to do with like a rigorous and explicitly, purposely designed system surrounding the supernatural, surrounding God. Like that's what theology is. It's a purposely constructed system of belief. Now, when you're talking about metaphysics, metaphysics is something that's like above the natural, beyond the natural. But if you say something is metaphysical, it doesn't imply that it has any kind of purposeful structure, right? So I tend to use metaphysical here, but also because from the little bit I know about more recent philosophers, Judith Butler talks about gender in the frame of being based in metaphysical. Like our social attitudes about gender are based in the metaphysical. And so, I mean, ultimately, like what that means is that they're socialized with certain attitudes. And then when they're looking for a reason for why this thing is acceptable, or they don't like this thing or something, they point to some kind of structure that exists, some kind of reason that exists, like beyond nature, or they appeal to some kind of implicit order of the universe that can't really be found in biology, that can't really be found entirely socially. It's somewhere else. I tend to say that like when something cannot be grounded in the material rather immediately for like its justification, then we're talking about metaphysics instead. And a lot of conversations about gender are metaphysical. I mean, sometimes when we're talking about like this from a queer angle, we are talking about something that's essentially metaphysical, and we're drawing on that to talk about that. But I will say 100% of the like cis, super, ultra biologically based, they say it's biological, basically the cultural script that we have for sexuality and gender that's prevailing, like it's totally based in metaphysics. There is basically no element to this that is based on a nuanced understanding of science, of psychology, of biology, or of any other thing that can be empirically studied. So, I mean, yeah, like it sounds to me that this guy is ultimately kind of like justifying why he doesn't like people that he probably hasn't really even spent time around very much and hasn't been socialized to understand or empathize with. That's probably what's happening. But yeah, the place he's drawing on is something that's akin to what people draw on to defend religion. I believe in God because there's this ultimate structure of the universe that says such and such, and you go, can you show me that? And they're like, show you that. Like, it's just obvious, isn't it? There, you can't really get into it and defend it in any way that doesn't just appeal to more theoreticals, hypotheticals, abstract things. So unfortunately, you're going to be talking about metaphysics and theology and stuff with just about anybody when you talk about this stuff with, if you're butting up against the cultural prescription that we have for sex and gender, you're going to be talking about metaphysics. Like, you're not talking about science.
Yeah, and realizing that like how these systems reinforce themselves. I didn't know that Texas was just like a very, I mean, I get it now, but like the way you described it is like, it is a Christian government. Like it is basically based out of that. And then, so now you have this oppressive system that is anti-trans people, anti-queer identities. So it makes it hostile to them. So there's even less of them that appear. So it makes it feel even more normalized that that's not a thing. And if you are that, you are wrong and like doing something fucked up. And like places like Seattle, where that's just open, are weird and strange and just degenerate or whatever, demonic maybe. Yeah, I guess I'm realizing how that kind of feeds into itself. And what you said about, because they're all coming at it from a metaphysical, they have solutions. Christians have solutions for it, but none of them work at all.
Yeah.
And many of them are actively harmful. I think in watching your videos, the things that I've seen are, the first thing that I've known is that there's just social pressure from parents and family to not be queer and not be open about it and not talk about it. And like, that's the thing I noticed. I've got a Discord community of like pushing 3,500 people, and many of them are younger queer people. And just such a common story is just familial rejection. And I remember the study, and you probably know the one exactly, but like there's a study that basically says that if even one person, like trans suicide rates are super, super high by comparison to the norm. But if even one person is affirming of that trans person's gender, it goes off a cliff, and like that was really like a very formative like study for me. It was like, oh, well, I can be that guy for a lot of people, and like that might just like prevent some people from doing that,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like that's such a sad thing for me is that families just totally reject people. They tell them, they're fine. They sorry, I'm like looking at my notes and my cat is yelling at me in the background. Hold on, let me you like this is my audience will get mad if I don't show my little cat here real quick. I got a little goblin here.
I have a pug, and they look actually similar.
Oh my God, I love pugs. You've seen Milo and Otis probably, right?
Oh yeah. Hey, let me grab my pug so we can both have them at the same time. They'll be funny.
Oh, look at that little guy.
This is Piggy.
Piggy. Oh, hi, Piggy. Oh, I love pugs. Oh, how old is Piggy?
He's about 9.5.
Oh,
he's wondering what my wife is doing in the other room. He's like obsessed with her. Like Velcro pug is a common term. Like they will not leave their person alone.
Oh,
so he's like, why am I not in the same room as her?
That's sweet. Yeah. Oh, what a little guy. This is the best. This is the first on my channel, so I'm glad we're able to have this. Here, say something to. She won't. He seems super chill. Piggy.
Yeah, he's very relaxed. You can see his face used to be all black, and so he's got little eyebrows now and little old man beard, and
he looks like my big black dog for sure. Yeah. Like a lot of that. Oh man, that's fun. All right, get out of here, kitten. Get out of here. I know you want to go. So anyway, where I was going was that the Christian solutions don't work. They are to pressure people. They're basically to bully people out of being queer. They are effectively torturing, right? Like conversion therapy is just psychological and physical torture.
Yeah.
And like taking away and basically like fucking preying on it. Like that's like prey on it. I mean, are there others that I'm missing? But like that seems like the core strategies, and none of them, there is no data at all that any of that shit works in any long term. It's just people basically just fake it. That's what it seems like.
That's the thing is that so it doesn't work in actually making people not gay, and it doesn't work for keeping them on this earth either. Like it doesn't work in those ways. But while I don't think that most Christians who might say that something like that is what you should do, like, most Christians that are not like affirming will be like, oh, well, you should just like choose not to do it. They don't really think about, I mean, they don't put themselves in other people's like shoes and like try to think about what that would entail. They still think it's like a lifestyle, and there's still, some large amount of choice involved, even if they don't say that being gay is a choice, right? So they think it's a relatively small thing that you might have to struggle with. Like, if you like alcohol too much, it's like that. That's the common comparison, which like, no, it's not actually.
Get an anti-queer, get a don't be gay support group or something to that effect.
Yeah, like, literally. Literally, that's actually the number one method of like conversion therapy is a don't be gay support group, and you call it a Bible study group. The government essentially can't do anything about it, even in places where like gay conversion therapy or trans conversion therapy is not legal. These things still exist, and they have been the primary form of conversion therapy since before conversion therapy bans. Like conversion therapy is still illegal, or is illegal in Canada. Like it has a federal ban in Canada. And yet the primary method of conversion therapy, which is these support groups, which still are psychological torture and can have physical torture elements to them, like they're still going, and there's not really a way to make those go away without being like, people can't do certain religious practices anymore. And that's another conversation.
Yeah. Fucking impossible.
I will say though, they do the ultimate goal of the system here, of which like, basically transphobia and homophobia is a part of, it does succeed in achieving its goal. And I mean, that kind of torture is a means to that end. So
Right.
there's two major effects that like I've covered when talking about conversion therapy and just the Christian response, the conservative Christian rather than like affirming Christian response to queerness. And one is, I mean, people, like you said, like people don't stick around as much. And that's a goal of the system. Like if the system is causing that and you don't change it, that's intentional, right?
Yeah, it either goes underground where you don't see it, or those people leave, or
Yeah.
or they don't exist anymore. And at the end of the day, and that's why at the end of the day, it's a very cruel way to
Yeah.
approach it. And it really requires either very significant ignorance, which is totally real. Like lots of people are indoctrinated into these types of families that have this, and I try to have a lot of empathy for that as somebody who came from like a very, there's a lot of things I don't believe I used to, just like everyone else, and but yeah, or it comes from like malice, like real fucking deep like lack of empathy for other people. And since doing that video about the Mayday group that came here and that Her Voice movement, I mean, I've had someone reach out to me that said that they were like a daughter of somebody who's like their mother is still part of that community. And they described like coming out to them and how it was met with active like derision and chiding and like just overt like hatred towards them. And then now they're effectively no contact with them other than like one family member who did affirm their new name and gender and things like that. But like how, I mean, I think a lot of normal people, like liberal people who do not know trans people, they have no idea that this is what's happening underneath, and how like malicious it is, and how like another example is a thing that the Texas Make Military talk about was like this confusion with like trauma and queer identities, where they say trauma causes a queer identity rather than a queer identity leading you into trauma by forcing you into either into underground situations where you're dealing with things outside of normal spaces, and like it leads to more potential abuse, or to how like the Catholic Church, right? Perfect examples. Like the Catholic Church is just like this systemic abusive authority under religion. I don't know. And I don't think I've seen you necessarily talk directly about that or data around that, but like, that's another thing that I find very difficult to communicate to people and get them to understand.
I mean, an effect of this system isn't something that's intentional, and I would say is the more explicitly, overtly stated as intentional bit of this is not just getting people to not be here anymore, to either go completely underground or disappear from the earth. Like it is to create out of a perfectly normal, healthy person someone who is traumatized, so that they will act as a pawn in this game that ultimately, just helps Christian cis hegemony perpetuate itself. So one way that I've talked about this in my content is that so there's this thing called credibility enhancing displays. And it's basically this like social evolutionary theory of religious belief and how belief in the supernatural is instilled in people. So it's a broader theory that I could go into, but the basic thing here is people tend to believe things when they see people giving up or sacrificing for that belief. So like, why do people rally around like martyrs, right? Well, they gave up something. They sacrificed for that belief. So it must have something worth sacrificing for. It must be true, And so what this does when you are basically abusing people to, leave behind their sexuality or suppress it, basically sacrifice that, is you are creating the potential for people who can go around parading their experience of like psychological torture as like, look, I'm willing to go through this. It's so hard to have this sexual orientation and be like a practicing Christian. I've had to give up so much. This is so much more than giving up alcohol, but it's worth it for him, you know? And it's like, you can see, if you have very much empathy at all, like if you're not naive, that like these people are struggling, they are tortured, and yet they're up there on the stage proclaiming that all of this is worth it. That is so incredibly powerful as a tool to perpetuate Christian cishet hegemony. Like, why are the people that have the biggest platforms and have the most money from saying being gay is bad, like, why are they all like ex-gays? They have the ability to do that. I mean, it's the same thing as like, it's the same thing as like certain Black conservatives, especially in the South, right? It's like, well, I have like gone through all of this, but it's still worth it to like fight for capital, right? For capitalism.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I think that in Christian circles, at least in leadership, as I have gotten further into studying this stuff and interacting with people who perpetuate these systems, I think they know what they're doing. I think they know that if they cause people immense pain, they'll be either more likely to act as a pawn to get something at least, or they'll be more like convincing, like the pawns that are used will be more convincing if they've gone through a bunch of torture essentially, or someone is just so tortured in their life that they like need religion to continue to exist. Like if you don't want to live here anymore, then you might be more likely, studies have shown this, you might be more likely to latch on to a very conservative religious community, which maybe they're not going to affirm who you are. Maybe they're still going to say really shitty things about you or whatever, but at least that's community. Like at least it's something. And so, yeah, I do think that like at the top levels, Christian leaders do know that they're torturing people into compliance.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the people at the top of these, the more I learned about them, the more I was like, wow, these are real pieces of shit. Like these are some of the shittiest people I can ever think of. Matt Shea, I mean, obviously you saw the part about Matt Shea, but like, I'm like, damn, this guy was a legislator in my area for over a decade.
Yeah.
Fuck. No wonder my local politics is fucked, and I agree. There totally does seem to be like a carrot and stick approach to it, right? It's like they're going to give you the stick, they're going to bully you, and they don't care. Like if you go off and like go into a hole or become homeless, these people do not give a shit about that. But there's absolutely a carrot if you're part of that identity group and can bring that credibility to it. Milo Yiannopoulos is like one of the most like obvious ones, like seeing his turn into just hard like Christian faith with MTG and stuff is just like, like, but it's a total grift. And it's funny because like the social contagion thing is such a every time I think about it, I'm just like, everything they do is literally just a projection of like, or everything they accuse is just a projection where it's like, you're finding on social media that there's praise and if you turn trans, everyone is going to love you. And there's going to be this giant group of people that just love bomb you. There'll be all these advantages, which is like totally not true. It is absolutely the opposite. It is only going to be punishing. It is only going to be, hopefully you'll find the deferring community eventually. Like that's, I mean, the people in mine, right? Like that's, so many people seem to really like my Discord and it seems to keep growing because I've really focused on making it open to as many types of people as possible. I don't know if you have people who are have DID or systems. Are you familiar with systems? People who have, the layman's term is like, I mean, it's not accurate, but like multiple personalities, people who have very distinct like identities inside of them. Like my Discord is like a lot of these people. And I've learned a lot about them. And it's a very complex condition that is very difficult. And there's not a lot of like medical help that even really understands it. And often they have to build, but anyway, they find those communities eventually, but the reality that like, there's going to be some sort of reward system for coming out as trans is just never, ever there. And it is only in coming back to be the grifter and to do all of these like terrible things and to say all of these things and to be a tool for this, for the hegemony that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's like, I've made that point on my channel, and I've had, some people be like, come on, Drew, you're supposed to be a skeptic. It's in the name. I've totally seen people get rewarded for being trans, like people, like congratulating them for being open and like being affirming immediately and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I've totally seen people like come out as trans and then they like have a Discord community that's really supportive. That's not really actually as great as having protections for your housing, for, not being harassed at work. And it's like, yeah, you can have like, there are certainly like rewards that you can have, if you want to call them that, for being something that is, different than the rest. It's not just trans stuff. Like if you want to be countercultural in some way, that actually is more of a choice, right? Like if you're like goth or something like that, and you're really hardcore about it, there's going to be a small group of people who are going to like really like latch onto you and reward you. And you can get community out of that. And like, that's good. When we're talking about like, if you're saying that is enough of an incentive to make like 1% of human beings this consistently for as long as we can tell, humans have existed and been writing this stuff down, like I don't know that works out very well. Like why are there trans people in Saudi Arabia? Like why are there trans people in places at kind of at a similar rate where it's hasn't been as like stigmatized, right? So yeah, it's an argument that like just doesn't work when you dig into it. But there is a reactionary kind of like response to that, and being like, well, people can make friends on Discord really well, and like maybe even they're gonna find like a queer skate group or something to hang out with, and like that's worth it, isn't it? It's like, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's go a little bit further. I don't know if that's a good argument.
I mean, you definitely see it too. And again, like I know a queer person in a small rural community in Montana, very close to them, their family, but like they are only out to their parents, and they have a little sibling, that they live with. So like, because they do not want anyone else in that community to find out, because these small communities, I mean, something like that is just like, I mean, it's going to be everywhere the moment you say something like that. And, what is it, to quote the conservative, like, try being queer in a small town, try that in a small town. And what you'll find out is like, there is not much of what community exists for that.
Right.
You're only going to get like judgment, and like realizing again, in a lot of these communities where like things aren't going on, people are kind of just like, they obsess over other people's shit rather than like any broader thing going on in their life, or building things. And in many ways, like I have found that religion, I'm not anti-theist. I used to kind of think that. I used to kind of be that way. And I am curious to know your opinion on this. I know you said that you're a pluralist, which I think I want you to define here in a second.
Yeah.
But as a leftist, do you feel like we need to be more in the Lenin mentality, where we say religion cannot exist, the religion, and or even even as an anarchist, Machino, like no gods, no masters? Like, do we need to get there where we are basically anti-religion? Or, because right now where I am leaning to, and why I'm trying to learn so much, is I'm thinking like we probably need to find a way to make religion compatible with leftism in some way. And I have seen positive aspects of religion. I have seen people get community out of it that is not judgmental, that is about building things and helping people, and not about, enforcing strict standards and rules onto people. So what do you think about that? Pluralist, what's that mean again?
Yeah, so a pluralist is basically somebody that believes in equal accommodation in the public sphere for people who believe in a variety of, or hold to a variety of religious traditions.
Okay.
So I think like it's not like a common term or popular term that a lot of people use, but when I talk about it, people are like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah. I mean, I guess that's what I think that." And it's almost a word that is used by ex-anti-theists in a way. So in getting into the like kind of anti-theist and leftist discourse here, the thing that I'll do is just say something that I've said plenty of times on my channel. When we're talking about what religion is, we have to catch ourselves and realize that a lot of the time where we start is where a certain type of Christianity is, because that's what we know. Like, if we're talking about religion, We're talking about something way larger, way more diverse, way more ancient, way more expansive, and hard to define than like Christianity. So I think that some of the like earlier leftist writers, I mean, and revolutionaries even, that were dealing with a relatively homogenous Christian population, the way they treat religion is the way they treat like the Russian Orthodox Church. Which, I mean, do I think the Russian Orthodox Church should have any say in people's lives and in people's like, in government? Fuck no. So yeah, like if from that perspective, it looks like, oh, I'd be like an anti-theist or something. But the reality is, like, if you actually understand, especially actually in Russia, Russia is a really, really good example. If you understand how religion has historically been practiced in places like Siberia and like Eastern Russia, not necessarily, or Eastern Russia, not necessarily in Siberia, like the Orthodox Church there, Christianity represented like a diametric opposition to the way that things were actually done in practice, which I think that would have been useful in fomenting resistance to like capitalist hegemony and like capitalist exploitation. So Christianity is a very large, expansive thing. And so I don't want to say, Christianity is this. Christianity does not have one definition. It doesn't have one true practice. The only way to say that Christianity is one thing is to use a theological, metaphysical, like woo-woo argument to say, well, true Christianity is this. Now, Christianity is a social phenomenon, cultural phenomenon, and exists in infinite variety. So I'm not gonna.
It seems to me that everybody's religion is really a religion of one at the end of the day.
Yes, that's a good way of saying it. Yeah, absolutely. But that said, like Christianity in the instantiation of the Eastern Orthodox Church, like pre like Russian Revolution, pre like creation of the USSR, was explicitly working with like monarchy, was explicitly working under almost kind of like a theological or a theocratic premise. It was working alongside capitalist exploitation at the same time. And meanwhile, in like Siberia and in Eastern Russia, you have these communities that have practiced some form of what Christianity called like paganism or animism or whatever, usually these kind of more pejorative labels. They've been doing this for forever. And those communities were really, really hard to colonize. They're really hard to control, right? And it's not because like they're necessarily bowing down before the equal to the master that like the Eastern Orthodox Church represents, right? It doesn't mean that like they're taking this like overly hierarchical stance. It's just they have a different, high God at the top of the hierarchy than the Eastern Orthodox Church. No, these religious communities might actually be about finding meaning and purpose within the relationships that you have in the community, through serving your community, through effectively solidarity, and even having a fundamental like metaphysical view of the universe that made it to where you did not believe that gods were to be like just worshipped and that you're inferior. No, you acknowledge them as being maybe having more power than you do. And so you develop a reciprocity with them. But if they don't give you something that makes your sacrifice to them or gift to them fair, fuck you, I'm going to a different God. This is really something that has existed within religion always. And I think that it is kind of a purposeful tool of, I guess we'll just say, conservative religion, exploitative, hyper controlling religion, to make us that leave religion think that religion has always been them, right? That is a part of their propaganda. And if we continue to accept that, then we are not going to be able to empower ourselves with the tool that religion has actually provided for all of human history and resist them and their exploitation. So if someone's not religious, for whatever reason, like that's their prerogative, that's fine. I'm not religious. I'm not super interested in like being a part of a religion. And I think that I can function and resist that type of thing, gods and masters or whatever you want to call it, like without having religion. But there are people that they resist better, they create better lives for themselves, and they treat people better with that framework. And as long as the outcomes are such that like the community benefits from that, that they benefit from that, whatever, believe in metaphysical stuff, serve gods, whatever. I care about the actual outcomes. And I think that is something that while a lot of early leftists cared about, they care about the ultimate outcomes, they're materialists, all this kind of stuff. I think they bought into the idea that religion is inherently what the oppressive religious structures told them it was.
Yeah, wasn't it Marx that said that like it's the opium of the masses? I think, and seeing it as a control piece. And again, I think it's really easy to look at religion, especially in the United States, and be like, yeah, I mean, that's very clearly this is a control thing.
Yeah. It absolutely is. Religion totally is that, but it's also tons of other stuff, right?
Yeah. Spiritualism is like the way I think of it now is like, I know people in my family, I know like I've got people who are Christian. My mother goes to like church a lot. She's very into her church, her Christian church. And it seems like a great place. Like, it seems like they do a lot of the positive parts. She would never be a part of a place that does any type of like, they live up in Alaska. And one of the things that's interesting about it, I think of Alaska and Texas as very similar places in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know if you've ever been to Alaska before, but like, it's like cool Texas, in my opinion. It's the things that Texas wants to be and thinks that it is, right? Where it's like, we're just independent. We do whatever we want. And we're, Alaska is actually that, because when I was there, I lived there for like 7 or 8 years, and Alaska, the community in Alaska is like, it's very individualistic. And the thing, when you're in Alaska, you do not feel like you are part of the lower 48. You feel very separated from it. And it builds a community that is very much like, hey, I'm here because like, I really kind of don't want to be fucked with. And I really like the independence and the maximum freedom that being very disconnected from the US government like allows. And I'm not going to fuck with you and you're not going to fuck with me. Cool. Like that's very Alaska. And they have they're very supportive of trans people up there. They have a lot of like Pacific Islander and like East Asian community like sex, and like those are all seem very supportive of genders other than like, the strict heterosexual man woman. But spiritual seems totally fine to me. I've seen a lot of positivity out of that. And it seems like there's just an aspect of humanity where we want answers to questions. I know, like one of the saddest things, I think that for me, like I stayed spiritual for a long time because I was afraid of death and mortality. And like, it's comforting to think that there is more to life after this. And, in coming to like reality of mortality is like, man, it sucks. I'm not going to learn everything there is to know about everything. Cause I'm just like really curious about stuff. And like, the world is so fascinating. And like the way things work is so fascinating. But I think we want to plug answers into those things. And it seems like religion is just like a very convenient, like, you just tape over whatever insecurities you have, whatever thing you're not confident you don't know. Just slap some God on there as much as you need to make it go down your fucking gullet is what it kind of feels like to me. And yeah, that just makes people very manipulatable. And that is the only problem I see to it. And I think it sounds like we're kind of on the same page where I'm seeing like a need to be open to religion and to even be able to speak to people on their terms of religion in order to be able to get them out of the shitty parts of it. And they can keep the good parts that they want to have that make their life better. And just like discard the stuff that's like that's based on capitalism and based on like patriarchy and like maintaining the systems of control that exist.
Yeah. I would recommend to, you and your audience that you watch a debate that my friend Ocean Keltoy had with Vosh a couple years ago. And like Vosh had this very strongly anti-theist, like equating, it was like kind of hilariously bad in my opinion, like equating all religion to like fundamentalist Christianity, and they all act that way. And it's like, have you never talked to people who aren't just like Christian or like a very certain type of Muslim? Like, you never talk to people who like believe anything different than that? Like that kind of speaks more to your lack of experience and lack of understanding of religion than anything else. But Ocean made the point, like he's a Norse polytheist, and he made the point that like, well, so Vosh, you're saying that you can't argue any kind of point like toward leftism, like you can't actually argue any in you can't argue anyone into any point that you have without arguing them out of belief in the supernatural completely. And Ocean's like, I've been able to do it, why haven't you? And it was just like that moment for me, I was just like, a lot of the time, I mean, we've seen the stubbornness and the ignorance, the desire not to understand. Like you see that with the folks that you were, standing outside of their camp on the steps of, City Hall in Seattle, right? Like you saw those types of people. But I mean, there are other people that exist with different attitudes, and we do have to figure out how to speak to them on their terms. And having like leftists that are religious and are very good at speaking to people on those terms, you'll find that like those people often can move people's positions around. And yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it does not make sense to talk about like solidarity of man or whatever without having some kind of understanding of and tolerance for a plurality of ways of viewing things when it comes to the metaphysical. Like we can't have that kind of intolerance. Like it doesn't work. I mean, just from a practical standpoint, it doesn't fucking work. Like,
yeah, these people aren't going to listen to you. And my partner came up with this great idea. She has many great ideas on how to like combat this. And she was one of the people that was like, people are going to be out there in block. That's really not, I mean, are they going to be flipping over cop cars? Because if they're not, they probably should be out there in something that looks less intimidating, and thinking about like, what is this going to look like to cameras that are absolutely going to be there? And like, how is this going to be weaponized by the other media and people? And she had the idea of she's like, we need to find like a trans Christian preacher, and we need to get out there and we need to arrange like a prayer circle next to them, and we need to be inviting them into that, and just, hey, let's pray for the city of Seattle, let's pray for peace, like demonstrate that, hey, we can be these identities, and like we can also have all the good values there, and like really, like you really need to take the battle like onto their battleground to really like win.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. So I think that's a fantastic idea. And I will say that a lot of like, specifically like trans Christians, they're in it. Like they're often very, very mobilized. They're very focused. Like they strategize. They're often very educated.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that'd be something that would be doable. And in the, Pacific Northwest, you have like decently sized Christian churches that will have queer people of all kinds in there, like maybe even in the clergy. And so you could totally find something like that. Yeah. When I watched your video and you were standing like at the gate there, where people were being let in like one at a time, I just remember like you said that basically the way you got in was to say what church you went to. I could have totally gotten in, because like I was raised in that, and I can code switch. It's really easy. Like I totally could have. I would have been like, okay, AJ, you stay out here. You keep going around with the bike. You keep like filming the cops fucking arresting people for no reason. You do that. I'm going to go get a button-down shirt on real quick, and I'm going to go inside, and then I'm going to let you guys know what's going on the inside so that we can inform ourselves, keep people safe. And if there was a prayer circle, then send people over like, hey, there's like a prayer circle thing going on outside. Like if you guys want to go to that, like I might go to that. And they'd be like, oh yeah, cool. And then they find out that it's queer people prayer circle, right? But maybe they'll go ahead and go since they're already over there. I totally would have loved to go in and infiltrate and stand among those people. Like as unsafe as many might feel, I have the unfortunate, like luxury of knowing exactly how to look and talk and even move like those people. So,
yeah, I mean, it's the same thing I feel when I walk into like spaces like bars and stuff, or places that like or again, like around athletics and like hyper masculine places that I've existed a lot, like I'm totally comfortable around those people, even with painted nails and shit. And like, because yeah, I know those dudes. Like it's pretty simple. Oh, we just want to rip on each other, and whoever's the funniest and most clever and cool, I can play that game too, just like anybody else. But yeah, like having that, like had you done, like we had people go in there, like I saw people with signs that were against it that somehow just made it past, I think before they got everything figured out. But like we didn't have anything like that. There's very low tactical strategizing at either of those, other than, from my experience, other than my group who had a very specific intent and understood that we were like, we want to be a positive thing. We want people to see us positively. I want people to see bikers. I did the Mayday protest here, and I was part of another moto crew, and like we kind of did we were at the front of the parade, and we did like traffic management, and we like kept it private because we didn't want the cops to know because they would fuck around with it. But like I had people, like older people, say, thank you for being here. We feel so much safer that we know that there are motorcycle riders here, because like not realizing, I mean, I know my helmet is like terrifying to people. I was running up at Cal Anderson yesterday. I organized there before I went for my birthday ride, but I was handing out stickers to people, and I walked up and people would be like, holy shit, because I look scary. But it's part of like the code switching and the trickery to like, I'm actually a super friendly dude, in fact. And I hate violence, but like in a more inclusive way that includes like systemic violence as well.
Yeah.
I want to get into the last kind of piece of it before we end, which is the conversation you had about satanic panic, because that really does seem like the core of transphobia and the core of the metaphysical attacks and the core of what these people believe. And like I didn't realize you had an interview, and maybe you can say the name of the person you had a really long interview with, who I think is the person. What's their name that you had a discussion with?
Would it be Dr. Joseph Laycock, the guy that like studies Satanism, or
maybe he has a little longer dark brown hair?
Yeah, that's Joseph Laycock. Yeah,
that's an amazing interview. It's such an educational conversation. I'm so glad I watched that. He informed me. It's like black is like a satanic color, and so showing up in all black, you are feeding into the perspective that these people are demonically possessed. Like that is the truth. They believe that if you are trans, you're being spoken to like a demon. If you are feeling confused about your religion or about things, like that is the demon and Satanism like working through you. Like realizing like how, I mean, these are designed specifically to like counter, I think, like informing and like the ways that you would deprogram people. Like they have strategies for all of this shit. It's all built in. And he talked about, I didn't realize that the Ukraine war now is basically effectively built on Satanism and the belief that there is it's not even anti-Nazism anymore. It's like, no, there are Satanists like driving Ukraine, and we need to get them out and protect them. Like that's wild. And going back to what you're saying, like the Christian, the anti-religion part of that, and like how, wow, it is really like snapped way back. Yeah, like that's crazy. So I guess like from that perspective, like, Waco was another one. It was like this feeling that like those people were very much like in the satanic panic and they, driven by that type of but like maybe you can talk about like what is the modern satanic panic from your perspective? Like what are these things that people believe that someone like me and my audience should know that can help us in engaging with those people in a better, more productive way, or at least lean out of the ways that they are actively like protecting themselves from deprogramming or deconstruction.
So the first thing that I'll say here kind of again is that I think that the entire idea, the whole theological structure, the metaphysical beliefs that these people have surrounding queer issues and around leftism too, those are post hoc rationalizations. They have social attitudes about people who look or act, different in some way. And then they figure out, why they feel that way and why they're justified in thinking and feeling that way without like looking back on the way that they've been programmed or analyzing the way they've been socialized. Right. So like they lean away from any kind of materialist analysis of their own being, basically. And they just look at like, well, I feel uncomfortable with this because this ultimately is evil. you know, and some people will, strangely enough, like the nice, polite Christians, some that I've known, will be like, well, you know, I don't hate trans people, and I don't think that they should be made to feel bad. And you know what? Those people, those human beings, are not really even doing anything wrong. They are to be loved and to be shown love. But I feel really uncomfortable with it. Why is that? And I think it's because I can sense that the enemy has a hold on them. And that either means that literally there's an actual, like, invisible monster, like for real, not an exaggeration, on their shoulder, like whispering. This is how I was taught. Like, this actually happened. Like, that there's a little, like a gargoyle, like whispering, you know? And that's how I was taught that, like, that's where porn comes from, is little guys whispering in people's ears to force them to do satanic porn, right? Like, all porn is satanic, by the way. Yeah, but that's one way of looking at it. Or just being like, these people have been, you know, controlled through all of these like subliminals that the enemy, the devil, a literal invisible monster, has put out there. And so it can be difficult to know exactly how to confront this, because people might be like really polite and nice, but then ultimately have a perspective that wholeheartedly supports full-on systemic violence and even warfare, right? So like, these people might be like, yeah, well, I would support invading Ukraine if I was convinced that there were Satanists there. Meanwhile, they're also like, well, everyone should be treated with love and respect. And and they're actually very nice to people that they're different from. This is something that this allows people to do. It's a dehumanizing tactic. So you got to realize that the ultimate gambit here is changing someone's social attitude. Are they uncomfortable with you? If they continue to be uncomfortable around queer people, they're going to keep going back and back and back, like, to find new ways to justify their discomfort. If somehow you're able to chip away at their discomfort, that's the ultimate way to actually change minds and attitudes. It's also the hardest thing to do, isn't it? Especially for queer people, right? And especially at events like I forget what was it called again?
It the Mayday thing. Mayday.
Okay, Mayday.
I have no idea why they chose that. Very dumb. I don't know. Maybe there's a greater strategy to it that I don't know. But
yeah, I'll get into the strategy here. Maybe I'll be of more utility to explain the way that I think that they reasoned out doing this, rather than explaining like how you can combat it. You might understand better how to combat it in your city with your people, like better than me. But I can explain like where they're at, if that helps.
Sure. Yeah.
So May Day, it's a day in May, yes. But what does that name convey? Like, oh no, watch out, SOS, help. That's what this is trying to convey. That is what that marketing is. Like, Mayday, Mayday, Christians are under attack. That is what this means. It's very much intentional. It's funny to hear you say that, like, that wasn't the connection you made, because as soon as you said it, I was like, oh God, and another one of these things that's marketed in this way. But so you don't see these things happening in Texas in the same way. I mean, people like are very visible about Christianity and stuff in Texas and in the South generally. And if they did something big like this on the Capitol steps here in Austin, they would also get a bunch of, you know, Antifa biker guys like showing up that wouldn't like it. But Christians feel safe in Texas. They know they completely control it. And so the spectacle isn't the same. It doesn't feel the same. The vibes are different. The reason why they go into a place like Seattle is because there are more leftists there, because they don't have complete control over the state. And I mean, I suppose also because they know that they can, like, even more than usual, weaponize the police, who are really butthurt about the fact that they've received physical resistance before. Whereas in Texas, you don't have quite the same level of people physically resisting. We're like, oh, we're really big about guns and all this kind of shit, but we don't actually resist actual forces of violence and like militias like the police. Like,
yeah, it definitely felt intentional. It felt like they knew exactly what they were doing, and they were coming to I mean, again, the more I thought about it and the more I watched your content, the more I was like, they were probably thinking, we are going to purge this place of the evilness that is here because, and the cops just happen to hate Cal Anderson too, because they see it as the center of Antifa. Like literally the police officers guild fucking said it. Like that's how they see it. And yeah, like, and again, like the black and like realizing like, oh, these are all like signs to these people. And like, I think you had a video where it was showing how the Monster Energy logo like was shown as like 666, some Hebrewisk word or whatever. And just like, holy, it's all, like you said, post hoc rationalization.
Yeah.
And you can't, I mean, in my experience, you can't, in the same way with lane splitting is like people have decided they don't like it because people get in front of them and like, and it scares them because they're not actually paying attention while they're driving. They're like just totally zoned out and a motorcycle goes by them and they're just like freaked into like reality, but they post hoc justify it and say that's clearly very dangerous without having any data behind it. And so I don't engage with those arguments anymore that way. I'm just like, well, here, I've been doing it and like, you know, fuck you. Like,
no, but with the Mayday thing, like they put people, you know, the reason why I think they not only went to, you know, the center of Antifa, why they chose that, but then also did something on the Capitol steps, like just a little bit later. It's not just about like, oh, we're going to take this place back. Like I do think it obviously has to do with that. They're trying to claim territory that they think belongs to the enemy, right? But this whole thing was about creating a spectacle where they can claim persecution on purpose, you know? So they know that like anti-fascist people are going to show up to try to keep people safe and to you know, at least just like protest, even if it's just like verbally speaking. They're just like have signs or, you know, whatever, they have a physical presence, whatever. They know they're going to show up, but also they know that the police are going to show up in massive force. And for these like people who have a preconception about Christians being persecuted, they believe that the police are like very much good, you know, they're very much on their side. Like they see them as being like a clear and obvious example of righteousness. And so it's like, if these people, if the police are challenged or if the police do anything, then that automatically means that there was something real and actionable that happened. And we can basically, I mean, what, like, wasn't there a balloon popped and a bunch of cops started jumping all over people and arresting them? And it was like nearly 30 people got detained. Like, these Mayday people know that's going to happen. They know that's going to happen. And then they know that because the people who are watching Fox News or on social media or whatever, they're not going to question whether the cops did anything wrong. They're just like, this is a perfect storm for us. Even if like the Antifa guys don't do anything wrong, if they don't do anything at all, and all it is Christians partying surrounded by cops, it's going to send the message that, well, you have to have the police to even be Christian, right? Like it's going to send, they win no matter what you do with this kind of move, and it's on purpose. And so, I mean, you can take it from there what you think should be done, you know, organizing in your city with your people. I think the prayer thing was like a really good idea. Having some people who are raised like me that can code switch, who can go in and at least just get some intel to send to the outside might help, just to maybe reduce spectacle or just keep people safe from the fucking cops. Like,
yeah. Hey, like de-escalate people so they don't fucking get fucked with or like inform them. It's funny you say that they would have done no matter what, because they went down to LA right afterward, the week after, and LA denied their permit. But at the end of the day, they didn't do anything specifically, and there wasn't much of a resistance to it. But they were surrounded by like LAPD, like sheriff's department, like cops, things like that. And at the end of it, they had a massive 3-page complaint about not getting supported enough. You know, like that. You're totally right. Like they were making shit. They're going to make something of it one way or another.
It's all spectacle. Like this is what it is. It's just propaganda. Like they were trying to make a piece of propaganda. I mean, the truth is that anywhere in the United States, Christians can gather en masse and like celebrate and worship. And you know what? Like the vast majority of people on the left don't care. Like they don't even care about that. So they purposely create spectacle to like insist on this idea that they're persecuted, and this manufactures consent for removing the rights of the people that do protest these things, you know?
Yeah. And it was very clear that, they got, and again, in Seattle, it felt like they got a big W, because even though they complained about it, I don't think that shit was on Fox News anywhere. I don't think anybody really covered it. Almost nobody covered the Seattle ones, is what I realized. Like that was not on national news. And even like LA is, in fucking big trouble right now. And a lot of the major news stations are like, they're doing their best to not cover it, because I think that, again, it's about manufacturing consent. It's about hiding what is happening and only giving resistance to a certain level of resistance that is not too painful to the people in charge, that doesn't make it look like resistance is very possible, and does not demonstrate like how violent and aggressive. Because again, people complaining at masks, that was, I didn't wear a mask at this one, which is one of the first ones I didn't, because I realized over time, I've been to like the big April 5th thing with 5051. I went to several like Tesla like showroom pickets and stuff, and I was amazed at how many liberals were like, take off your mask, and like how that's seen as such an aggressive thing. But now we've got fucking ICE and cops out there with masks, and it's like, holy shit. And I don't know, I'm hoping that's gonna help us in this information war that we're in, but like, yeah, like, or maybe people will just, maybe people will just be of two minds about it.
Well, they're going to be like, oh, well, they need it because ICE is under so much public pressure to not illegally arrest, detain, and deport people. Like, the cops need it. They need it for their protection, like that's going to be a narrative. But maybe there'll be some people that hopefully are like, oh, well, wait, like ICE and the cops are like wearing masks. Why can't like everybody wear masks then? Some people will hopefully think that.
You described evil, the concept of evil, as basically intellectual laziness. And that's kind of what I see it as too. Like they insert the God and they just say evil, 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 so that you don't think much harder than that. And I do feel like, and I'm sure you feel like, because you had a Christian upbringing and you went to a Christian school, so you realize like how incomplete maybe education is, in like the same topics are discussed, but like from a very specific lens that is not inclusive of the full pieces. And kind of, is that how you kind of feel like your content is like, and I feel like that's maybe why you come at it the way you do, is like, let me help fill in the gaps of education that you have been missing. And do you think that is maybe another effective strategy that I could use at these pieces to try to like figure out ways that I can try to inform people better, and maybe increase their own curiosity to do more digging later?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I try to do is fill in those gaps, but I think my overall approach is to try to provide baseline education upon which people can later hopefully form the, not necessarily identities, but methods of action. And so I think that it's pretty obvious that, I mean, especially in Texas, it seems like the fascists are attacking education. Like that is kind of ground zero, is like public schools at this point. And I'm making a video right now about how this is happening. And it's because if you have big gaps in education, if you are able to educate people in just like such a narrow way, limited way, it's really easy to control their perspectives going forward. So if we can disrupt that rather than just having a reactionary stance, like saying, hey, what they're saying is wrong, if we can actually come in and provide education for people, I think that allows them to ultimately do a lot of the work of responding to things and debunking things and discerning, lies from truth and stuff. It allows them to do that on their own, so that we don't have to like have a body on every single person that we're trying to like say, no, 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 don't believe that. Don't believe that. There's not enough of us, and nobody has the ability to just like debunk every bit of misinformation that might be out there. So the thing to do, I think, is to be proactive and try to provide a more holistic picture of whether it's history or social science or science, psychology, whatever. Yeah, I'm glad that, you kind of seem to get that like inclination that that's my approach, because absolutely it's trying to be proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah, definitely. Again, the way it seems like the way that we get defeated on the left is that people are just very focused on responding to things, like rather than going on the attack. And like, because that's how, I mean, again, it's very obvious. Like, when does Donald Trump not attack? Like, that is when when are these people just constantly trying to not create new fires to send people to? I mean, it's just it's a very effective strategy that they've just leaned into. Yeah,
And I mean,
I try to do the inform. Oh, go ahead.
You know that like anarchists often have libraries because like the basis of, whether it's community policing or like solidarity, like support of your community, is being well informed on like how you got here, everybody's place in society, and like being educated. I mean, that's the basis of like a civil society without like exploitative hierarchy, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily call myself like an anarchist, but like, yeah, I think it's a pretty solid idea. is making sure that we can actually provide that base for people so that we don't have to just be attacking all the time, right? Like we can sit there and serve our communities, and that preempts someone from, falling down the rabbit hole when there's just a back and forth going on over and over and over.
Yeah, I think of the most important way I can educate people right now is just by showing people what's happening in the streets, like realizing that like a lot of people are afraid. They're really afraid to be out there in like in that space. And like the life I've lived gives me a particular set of skills, as they say, to where like when you ride a motorcycle at 160 miles an hour in a t-shirt and shorts, like when you confront death in a way that like I think a lot of normal people just do not, it's and when you've had like a gun in your face the number of times that I have, it's just like, yeah, it's different, right? It's just like anything else. It's like exposure therapy. It's like, no, I can keep it cool here. This guy's not, whatever. But a lot of people don't have that experience. And so informing them of it by being there and like, again, learning with the chop was like, if I can show people the reality and realizing how much propaganda is just going to be made by very selective editing and by giving people very contained moments rather than the entirety of because the chop was like fucking 30 days, it was like a month. And then people started talking about, oh, it's so violent. And people still come in my comments saying Seattle burned down in 2020. What are you talking about? And it's like, I mean, the intellectual curiosity is very low when you're saying things like that, but that is that's the reason, that's the justification people are giving themselves to like totally check out of that. You've been very generous with your time, Drew, and I really appreciate it. And I'll close this out. Is there anything you wanted to ask or talk about before I get to my final questions, which are not as serious at all?
Well, I mean, the main thing that I was really looking forward to talking to was the whole Mayday thing. And I feel like I was able to say my piece. And I really appreciate you, asking for my perspective on that.
I definitely need it. I've been wrong enough about things in life that I'm very interested in hearing other people's opinions. And again, learning that with like leftism, and I still struggle with it in my community, is getting people to just like, Harry Potter is like a perfect example. Like there are people in the queer community that are very unhappy about Harry Potter and they don't want to hear it described at all. They don't want to hear it talked about. Like it's triggering for them, and for various reasons. And I totally get it, but it's like, look, you gotta be able to hold other people's ideas and concepts in a non-emotional way and try to like examine them from a distance in order to figure out, is there something useful here to take away that you can use to then further whatever you think is right or whatever. And yeah, like religion, just realizing like how little I knew is very humbling, and it's important. Like I'm seeing the failure to know created like is part, as much as I was not the core, I was never in block, during the Mayday shit. Like I feel like I was a very positive part of both of those, and I played a very important role. I had a lot of arguments with local Seattle organizers and other people in the activist community who didn't like my plans, who I had massive arguments with, people that did not, who I don't think are ever going to talk to me, you know, because they think I'm just out there to gain personal clout, and like really there's nothing I can do to change that. And they're also afraid, and they're very focused on their own personal safety. But yeah, so I'm glad I definitely want to shore that shit up so that next time, and I'm in these conversations, I can guide people better, and I can't change what people are going to do, but at least I can have the confidence of like, you know what? I fucking had a lot of conversations about this, and you can go see them if you want, and you can go get informed too. And if you don't, that's your fucking fault. You know, it's kind of how I feel. Yeah, because as a leftist, again, I think you got to be able to go do your own fucking homework. Like it's part of it.
If you ever want any coaching on how to look and act like a good Christian boy so that you can like not set off people's radar, you have the look that you could do it. But for you, you're really expressive. You're really friendly. You're like, you put yourself out there. You're like, this is me. I'm right here. And like with the way that these folks see masculinity, like you're going to have to, that's going to be your biggest challenge. It's like, it's easy to wear something like, you know, you don't need to change like your hairstyle or anything like that. Obviously, like don't paint your nails, but like for you, you're going to have to be like, rein it in, and like don't really look like you're having that much fun. Like don't express yourself that much, because like that's not becoming of a man, you know.
Yeah.
Like you got to be like, yeah,
Yes.
cool, and like only look happy when you're like talking about the Lord. That's honestly
I
the
might
way
take
to do
you
it.
up on that, to be honest.
Yeah.
At a minimum,
That would
it
be
might
fun.
be interesting to do some infiltration. We definitely had people who infiltrated our movement as like wearing like trans shit. Like this fucking douchebag named Cam Higby was like part of the Jonathan Cho and these Katie Davenport people, and he's of course down in LA too. Like that's the other thing, like realizing that they literally ship people in from other places to like get their viral moment for their propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
So radicalizing.
Absolutely.
To realize
That was actually one of what I thought was one of the most valuable parts of your video, was just showing what it looked like on the other side of the camera. Because like is so clearly in not any, like no danger. He's totally safe. But then like also the voice, the code switching that he does, he's like talking to you guys, and then he's like, he's right there, officer. Like the voice that he uses to talk to the cops is like, it's so pathetic. Like what a kiss ass.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that was great that you showed that from the other side.
Yeah, I'm glad I got all that. And recording at these protests was one of the things that I had massive like like could not immovable object meets you know, whatever, like opposable force. Like that was an argument I had with people, and I was like, nope, I'm recording. Fuck you. Like this is why. And yeah, so I'm glad I did it, and like that was, yeah, but part of the learning process. I'm glad that we got it all. So the two questions I have that are not nearly as serious. One is I have yet to see you approach the most important topic in my life, which is I haven't seen you talking about motorcycles on your channel. What do you think about them? What do you think about lane splitting? Like, yeah, you're already skating. So I'll be honest. I think of skating. I quit skating because I was like, I ride motorcycles, and I'm like, skating is a fucking dangerous sport that I am so not interested in doing. Like,
okay, so I was listening to your interview with Noah Samson like last night, and like you guys were both talking about bikes and stuff, and I was like, he's probably gonna ask about bikes, and I'm like, I've never. So my wife grew up in Indonesia, and the main way that you get around is motorcycles, right? And so she, you know, rode motorcycles. Most of the time these are like relatively small. Like I don't know any terms for these things, but they're basically scooters. But she had like an actual bike, like for Indonesian standards, had like an actual bike for a little while, and was very proud of that. And I like when I visited Indonesia to see where she grew up, like I would ride on the back, and I'd be the little passenger, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't really drive much. Like I'm always passenger princess, and that's fine with me. I don't enjoy being like on or in a vehicle. Like it doesn't really like appeal to me very much. But last night when I was listening to this thing, like listening to you talk to Noah about this, I was like, I'm not, I feel like maybe I'm just not as much of a thrill seeker. I'm not willing to do like dangerous, things as much. And like you guys are talking about how there is misinformation about the danger of it, like of lane splitting in particular. I was like, I'm open-minded to be like, yeah, maybe that is just like a dumb social attitude that I've been programmed with, because I don't actually know. I don't really know the data. But I did catch myself going like, oh, I skate like a lot. And I've been skating for like over 20 years. So yeah, vehicles are not my vibe. But like, if you get what I get out of skating, like from your bike, like I love that for you. That's a wonderful thing. And I do have to say, I like the way that you challenge car dominance and supremacy with the way that you talk about bikes. Like, it's not just about like, we have the right to go fast and have fun. It's also like there's a fundamental perspective shift that you might have commuting in this way every day, not just like doing this as a hobby necessarily. Right. So I do appreciate that, but that's like my limited input on bikes. Yeah.
Do you wear a helmet and like pads and shit when you skate?
So I wear wrist guards and like knee shin guards. But no, I don't wear a helmet. And like the main thing is like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I have hit my head one time, and the way that I hit my head was I slightly hit my eye and it like ever so slightly bruised, and I was fine. I just got up and kept skating. If you skate larger ramps than I do, and if I'm a pretty like within my limits, within my skill set skater. Like I do things tricks that I've been able to do for 15 years, and I don't branch out a whole lot now that I'm 31. Like I used to when I was a little younger, but if I skated bigger ramps and stuff like that, I would wear a helmet. I have worn a helmet like at skate camp and stuff, but
Why
most of
don't
the
you wear a
time,
helmet? Just out of curiosity.
there's really no good reason. I just don't like
It
it.
doesn't look cool because you don't feel
Like
like it looks as cool.
I don't like it, and I also have the type of hair that like takes on what you do to it. So that means like this the
Yeah.
moment I put on, and so that's not a good reason, but that's the reason.
Another YouTuber that I just met who had a very small channel, but they had a video about Luigi Mangione that just blew up. Their name is Nathan Sky. I think they go by Philosophy, but they do rollerblading and they do a lot of that. And they have a video about how not wearing a helmet while you skate is toxic masculinity. And I watched and I was like, oh fuck, it kind of is. I am kind of, because in my world, again, like I don't wear gear a lot of time because I mean it is a comfort thing. Like riding a motorcycle, it's like physical comfort and like
Yeah.
all of that. But at the end of the day, it definitely is like I just feel cooler when I don't when I'm not when I go out in this, and like and my big skull, but I love my helmet. So yeah, no, I get it. That's cool. I'm you kind of have a punk aesthetic, I've kind of noticed. Do you feel like you're in that punk crowd at all? Or I feel like that's punk and skating goes together too.
Yeah, it's funny because I got a comment this morning that was like, "Wow, Dead Kennedy shirt." I never would have pictured you as someone that was into like punk rock or like punk music. Like that's been like my main musical place, since I was a teenager. And a lot of that had to do with like really angry music for some reason resonates with me, and I don't understand why, as a kid who was in a very oppressive like religious community and was chastised for any kind of difference. But now I think that, yeah, punk music does represent like my political stances more than it did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, it was like I'm angry about stuff and like authority is like really mean. And now it's that, but with a little bit more like intellectual stuff around it, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the skating, it absolutely goes like hand in hand with that. I don't know. I had an experience like not that long ago where this fucking guy in my neighborhood was in an argument with a lady. I don't know if she had a place to go or what, but like basically someone who was going through kind of a mental health crisis, and like it was in the middle of the night in my neighborhood, and she says some comment to him and he gets really offended and they start arguing. He starts yelling at her and being like, how dare you like condescend to me and argue with me and stuff. And I'm like, rollerblading around my neighborhood in the middle of the night, and I'm going up and being like, fuck you. Like, this guy's like, I'm gonna call the cops on this bitch. And I was like, fuck you, the cops aren't gonna do fucking anything, get the fuck out of here. And then I went and got my longboard, and I like came with my longboard and like walking over it, like, in case he's still here. Like, it's a weapon with plausible deniability, right? So it's like that. Yeah, so like punk rock, my politics, and skating like all definitely go like hand in hand. And like, you know, just like queer advocacy, like skate communities used to be super, super toxically masculine and crazy homophobic. I've had guys try to beat me up so many times just for the fact that I rollerblade, because that's too gay.
Yeah.
Right. But now, I mean, like, generally, if you go to the skate park, like, even the skateboarder guys are like, if you are there and you're like minding the vibe and you're getting along with people there, if people are picking on you for like being visibly queer, like, the skater guys who you wouldn't think care will come up and be like, fuck you, get out of here. You know? So
that's awesome. Even in Texas, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That was actually the core of that video that the philosophy guy made, is that talking about a lot of that, which I didn't realize, even though I used to rollerblade, and I still have a pair of rollerblades now, but I got out of it somewhat because of the bullying, like, because it was so queer coded, and like, you know, fruit booters, and like there's the one joke that destroyed rollerblading. How do you,
what's the hardest part of rollerblading is telling your parents that you're gay.
Yeah, and everybody knows it, and it's like, but yeah, it really is like, it had a massive impact on the rollerblading community. I had no idea, and even though it included me, yeah, you definitely have, and it's I like the punk vibe also, as somebody who's like super logical and rational and demonstrates intelligence. I love that part of it. I think that's great. The last question I had is how do I get a sex toy sponsorship from Closet or something? Because I feel like now the queer community very connected to these things. Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that sponsorship.
Hey, yeah, I mean, you know, that was something that, like, I have just an agency that the only thing that they do is like they find sponsors for me, and they're like, if you want this, you can take it, and you don't have to, you know, I'm under no obligation to take any amount of sponsors. So I don't really like think that with what I'm doing, having like an agent and a manager for media appearances is actually even ethical, because those people will be like, you should work with Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris. And I'm like, no, fuck those guys. Yeah. But I mean, you know, getting an ad agency that has a relationship with something like Closet, that's how you do it. And those guys, the sex toy sponsorships pay better than just about anything else, because not very many people are willing to do them comparatively to like VPNs. So okay, might help you out.
I'm just gonna send a random email, then see how, because I ain't gonna work with no fucking agencies, man. I feel like I am too much of a lightning rod, and I used to be very different and repress a lot of things. But yeah, that's been the thing that as I've gotten older, is I'm just like, man, fuck that. I don't want to be in any community or doing anything where I got to repress myself at all. And that's why I feel so safe in the cybersecurity community, because it is, and I don't know if you know anything about this, but like, it is, in a lot of technology, it's very like masculine, and like there's a lot of like, again, the same like dynamics you have. But in cybersecurity is pretty gay, and there's a lot of furries in it, and it's like it's different, you know, and it's filled with people who are about pushing boundaries, because that's what you kind of need to understand, is you need to understand the limits, and you're interested in that part of it. So being an anarchist and like into sex toys and like saying whatever the fuck you want is very okay.
Send them an email. Like, they do work with a lot of different people, so you know, you might have a shot.
I'm gonna do it. Them and Dragon. I've got a lot of friends that recommend Dragon. So thank you so much, Drew. Thank you for doing this. So awesome. I'm gonna send, and I'm excited you're in my community and that you're interested in hanging out. I'm sure a lot of my community would love to talk to you. I hang out there too, here and there. I jump in the chat and like to just decompress sometimes, especially on the weekends. So I hope you find it to be a welcoming community for you. I'm sure a lot of people would love to talk to you. So thanks again. And I'll have all your links to your stuff, but if there's anything specific, do you have an Instagram and like TikTok and all these things, or are you mainly YouTube?
No, I want to start an Instagram mostly for political reasons, just because it's easier to get people engaged to show up to stuff when you can like post a story. You don't have to post like a whole video. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, and so I do want to do that, but right now, yeah, it's just YouTube. And I appreciate you having me on here. This is the first time I have ever talked so explicitly about like leftist politics, period, because
Oh,
this is a huge taboo in the like skeptic atheist space. It's it
interesting.
it is neoliberalism propaganda central. Like,
Oh,
yeah, the
okay.
atheist space is like it's all civility politics. So you can't be a leftist or talk about it publicly, or else you'll get deplatformed. I have my platform, so at this point, I'm just like, fuck it. I'm gonna say what I actually think, and if people have problems with it, like, oh well, you can unsubscribe, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm so glad. And I have definitely, I think the reasons you described of like us needing to like come together more and like talk more and like definitely if something happened, I mean like that's kind of the reason I feel super safe too, is like if I disappeared, people fucking notice
Yeah,
fast. And if you disappeared, people would notice fast. And like knowing people with platforms who would amplify that and talk about that, I think is, I mean, it's part of the protection, and it's part of the difficulty I'm having here in Seattle is like, I'm like, hey, the solution for us, if you're afraid, is to be more vocal together and know that
exactly.
we're all going to have each other's
Yep.
back and don't hide. You know, don't hide. That's the opposite. We're gonna have bigger problems. But so yeah, I'm super glad to anyone who wants to like start being more vocal, more speak out and protect each other. Hell, fucking yeah, brother.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I appreciate that you building that with me. Like this is what we need.
hell yeah. And there's some other people I can think of who probably be interested in talking to you and like getting more engaged. And yeah.
Cool.
So, all right. I'm going to end the record button and,
Appreciate it.